The maker of some of the best movies and the most stinkiest movies that we have in our time has decided to take on the sci-fi genre. The question is, can he pull it off? Can he mix his amazing intelligence and research into a world that is full of fans that know all about the research and know all about the science, and can he make it work? I think he can.
The DownUnder reviews.
Interstellar 2014. Directed by Christopher Nolan and written by Christopher Nolan and his brother Jonathan Nolan. Apparently there have been a few years in the research of this movie, and it's kind of a pet project for theirs, especially to do with the research to do with black holes. And in fact the visuals for the black holes in the movie were very much a researched depiction, an accurate depiction of black holes apparently. Apparently they committed a lot of computer resources into creating a realistic portrayal of a black hole in terms of the light, the effects, the shapes, and also how ships would interact in terms of its gravity well around the event horizon. So they put in a lot of effort to make this realistic. And it reminds everybody of a movie called Gravity from 2013, which was a real revolution in terms of space movies, because someone was finally able to apply the amazing CGI and practical effects that they're able to achieve these days into a very scientific and sciencey and astronauty film, if that's even a word, I don't even know. And this is a kind of progression of that technology, but obviously done with the Nolan style. The movie stars Matthew McConaughey, which we all know of stars of big movies recently, like Mud, The Wolf of Wall Street, The Dallas Buyers Club, and he's really popular right now. And some people are calling him the McConaissance. His rise in Hollywood is being attributed to some term called the McConaissance. So, hey, let the McConaissance continue, because of course he did an excellent job in this movie, because he is able to portray the emotional depth required for an astronaut in a film who is linked to somewhere light years and light years away, which is Earth and his family and his home. Anne Hathaway is, of course, a big star at the moment. Most recently, she's done Les Miserables and The Dark Knight Rises, and they were extremely popular. And she showed that she's got acting chops. So, but unfortunately, when it comes to her and the McConaughey chemistry in this movie, they are able to effectively do scenes together, I think. But their approach to the plot doesn't always work out very well. And we'll get that into a little bit later. Also, there's John Lithgow is in it, and Michael Caine is in it, and bizarrely, there's a small role for a guy called Topher Grace. You might remember him from That 70s Show. I haven't seen him in anything since that awful Predators movie came out, which was trying to be like the original Predator movie and had the soundtrack from it and everything. And his character was like the twist of the movie, and I don't think he went very well at all, that movie, because I haven't seen him in much since. But hey, he's in there too. Casey Affleck is another character who's in the movie, and he does a reasonable job, but again, a very small role. Jessica Chastain is probably the third biggest character in this film, aside from Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey, I feel, because she is McConaughey's daughter, and she is kind of the central focal point for most of the story. Even though most of the scenes involve Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain is the emotional core and the scientific core of the movie, and that's where we always come home to in terms of our reference point to what they're doing in space. So, like most of the reviews you'll see out there for Interstellar, I have to start by talking about the visuals. Now, the visuals are, of course, the biggest selling point for this movie. But to be honest, I think it's one of the easiest things to get right in this day and age. All you have to do is throw a heap of money at a bunch of CGI artists and a bunch of practical effects artists, ADR artists, and just get them to make the best thing they possibly can, direct them and supervise them so that they do a reasonably good job, and then just in the editing process make it all blend together and get an amazing orchestra, and get Hans Zimmer, who's obviously the best score producer, the best composer that we have in our current time in terms of movie production in Hollywood, for sure. Have him write something that's just absolutely epic and out of this world, something that defines every single scene, and he does that really well. I think without Hans Zimmer, this movie would probably be extremely boring and routine, but because you've got these tracks that involve pipe organs, massive orchestras, electrical instruments, lots of different effects that are playing right through even the most basic of scenes, create so much tension in the movie that you're staring at it and you're afraid to blink. It's just so riveting to watch with the music. Sometimes I think the sound mix was a little bit off, because you couldn't actually hear what people were saying over the top of this orchestral music that was playing. It was really effective because it made you strain to hear what the people were trying to say, because some of it was really important exposition, but But in terms of emotional effectiveness, it worked throughout the movie, and whether or not that was on purpose, and I suspect it was, because apparently Chris Nolan is a very particular director and really makes sure every single second of his movies are tweaked the way he wants them, apparently. And that helped to bring the whole thing together. The visual effects are absolutely stunning. This is definitely the best presentation of the space environment that I have ever seen. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. I followed Star Trek since I was about 6 years old. All of the series through except for Enterprise, which doesn't exist to me, and all of the Star Wars as well. They all try to pick space. We're using the cinematic technology that was available at the time, and they all do quite phenomenal jobs, whether it's slightly realistic or slightly unrealistic, as in there's sound in space, which of course there isn't because it's a vacuum and sound doesn't have any particles to travel along, and things like explosions, which couldn't happen because there's no air in space. But Interstellar follows all of the physics, or it seems to follow all the physics of space, pretty much completely on point. There's no sound in space. The explosions have a little bit of flame because of the oxygen contained within the vessels exploding, but it doesn't turn into a stupid fireball. The shots that he does is so refreshing, and the way I think all movies should be done. And the shots that he does are ones that are actually camera locked down, watching the scene happen. You haven't got camera angle, camera angle, camera angle, camera angle, and you're just trying to work out what the hell is going on. And that is one of the biggest hates I have in film, is when cameras just fly all over the place as if it's creating some kind of dramatic effect, which in fact is just making it hard for the audience to enjoy the scene because they don't know what's going on. In this film, he locks the camera down and you're just following it, and all you can do is just stare at it and just in awe of how awesome it is. And that is the way to do it, particularly in space, because in space you're surrounded by blackness and there's not a lot to see. So when you lock down a camera and you're looking at blackness with a tiny object moving, or a planet in the background, or singular objects moving in the giant space of nothingness, it is so effective at making the audience just concentrate on what is going on and feeling the emotion and the impact of what's going on. It brings them into the environment. It doesn't take them out of the environment. And that's a big problem with a lot of films, is that you get taken out of the movie because you suddenly go, oh, I just can't follow this anymore, I'm confused. Whereas this movie, you just forgot you were in a chair because these camera angles were so good. There were camera angles on the sides of the shuttles, camera angles from thousands, I can imagine, thousands of miles away from the ship, just watching it, this tiny speck go along with a planet in the background. I just can't fault any of the photography whatsoever. I really can't. It's just phenomenal, and definitely the best part of the film. It definitely deserves the money you're going to pay for it, whether you go to the 70mm real film IMAX, which I think is a great thing that Nolan has done. He's actually distributed the film for IMAX in actual film stock, as opposed to a digital copy. Whether you see it like that or you see the digital copy in cinemas, either way, it's worth your money just to see that, and it'll blow your mind, regardless of the rest of the movie and how it plays out. So we've talked about video and we've talked about sound. Now we can just talk about the story. No spoilers in this review whatsoever, so I'm not going to give away anything crucial. But my opinion on the story of Interstellar is it's 50% excellent and 50% extremely flawed and a little bit frustrating. The 50% excellent part is the way that the main characters, their bonds are shown together, their communication styles, they all make the story very believable and very interesting. And they really launch the main plot, which is all in space, very well. They make you understand what they're doing, you understand what's going on and why they're doing things, and you're actually really interested and emotionally connected to definitely Matthew McConaughey. And he's the girl who plays his daughter, who's called Mackenzie Foy. She was in The Conjuring, and she also played the little kid from Twilight, I think. And she does an excellent job at creating this emotional bond. Unfortunately, they do a bit of a disservice to the actor who plays his son, Timothy Chalamet, I believe. He's only been in a couple of movies before, but he does a great job at acting, but the bond between him and his father is virtually non-existent, except that he intends to be a farmer just like his father. But you'll see later in the film, the bond just falls apart. There is no bond, and in the end, for no reason whatsoever, the son hates his father and hates what he's doing and just refuses to do what's needed to do in order to survive. It's really bizarre, and there's no explanation given as to why he suddenly just doesn't care about anyone. Now, the first 2/3 of the movie are epic, and they're very, very reminiscent of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you'll see this in a lot of reviews out there. It's an absolute echo of this movie. 2001: Space Odyssey, they even give references to it in Interstellar. In Interstellar, they've got robots who looks exactly like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Looks exactly like it, same color, same style, same shape, obviously rectangular. But the robots obviously turn into blocks and move, as you've seen in the previews. And I think that the robots are pretty much, other than Matthew McConaughey, the biggest stars of the movie. They're awesome. They have a very human style of talking, and the way that the humans are able to control their settings in order to adjust them to the way they prefer is like what the most ultimate mobile phone could ever be, they could ever design, all coming down to software, obviously. But it's great to see too, in terms of the hardware, you think that they're blocky and they can't do very much, but you'll see as the movie goes on, these robots can do like everything. They're amazing, and they're so helpful, and they really are the most grounded aspect of the movie. The part where you can always rely on just to be sensible and correct and to help the story move along. So I love those two robots, and I want one if it comes out. I'd never be able to afford one, but that would be awesome. Now it's when we come to the third act of the film, the part where the plot kind of needs to kind of settle down and start to resolve the story and see where have we been going with all of this. We've built it up to this sort of level of, okay, this is what we want to achieve, these are our goals, and this has been our adventure so far. How can we now bring this down into, let's fix this, let's resolve it? And is it going to be either a tragedy, or is it going to be a success story? Or is it going to be a success story with an aspect of tragedy to it, which is the way the films tend to need to go if they're not going to make a lot of money. Movies that just stop abruptly, and for some reason, the first movie that comes to mind is Memento, which was another Christopher Nolan film, but the reason that it stops abruptly is because it's going in reverse order, so that's kind of part of the movie, that's fine. But movies that stop without kind of coming to that either successful resolution or the tragic resolution tend to not be very successful, because the audience needs to feel like we've gone on a journey and we've finished the journey, not go on a journey and now I'm in limbo kind of thing. What does the movie do? Well, you watch it and you decide whether it's a successful ending or whether it's a tragic ending. But man, oh man, what I will say is the style changes. So the third act really switches style. Up until that point, it's been very logical, very reasonably scientific, and it's been very, even though there is a lot of scientific explanation and explanations, someone like me who comes from a Star Trek background, who's used to scientific explanations within the context of entertainment, is extremely used to this stuff and knows exactly what they're talking about and what they're trying to achieve. And in fact, most of the stuff that they do has been done before in terms of solutions to scientific problems. But I know that there are a lot of people out there who are not the best at science, and they're kind of confused about what the hell they're trying to achieve or what they're actually doing. And I respect that, but the great thing about this movie is you can watch it again, or you can look it up on Google and you can work it out very quickly. It's not actually like super complex stuff, they're just basic concepts about physics, time distortions, time dilations, gravity, those types of things. So these are big sort of high concepts that you can just Wikipedia and you'll be able to work it out in a few seconds, no problem. But for the third act, that's where it goes from science into ludicrousy. And I'm a little bit upset, but not too much, because the movie is still fun to watch. The movie is still fun to watch, but you got to just drop that whole scientific mindset of like, oh, they're trying to achieve this awesome mission and this is what they're doing and it's a problem-solving movie. Forget that. Now it's all about human emotion, illogical things that don't make sense, and the characters doing things that don't make sense and they're inconsistent with the rest of the movie. Everything up until that point had been logical and consistent with what they're trying to achieve. But now that just shit happens, it just happens. Stuff just happens, and they try to explain it a little bit, but generally speaking, you're like, well, why did you do that? Why? Like, oh, why are you so upset at that? Because before you were fine with it, you know? And also people, when they see each other and they're supposed to be all like, you would expect them to be like, oh my God, hey, what's up? You know, so excited or whatever because they're alive. Instead, they're just like, no, I'm fine, go. And you're just like, what? Anyway, once you see the movie, you'll understand all that stuff. But there's a massive number of plot holes that occur in the third act. Almost no plot holes in the first and second act that I can think of. Just the third act just falls apart. It's just a freaking disaster, if you ask me, and I just don't understand why this has occurred. Was it because the conclusion was rushed as opposed to the first two-thirds, which was well researched and well thought out? Or was this always the intention, and was Christopher Nolan really doing a 2001 Space Odyssey hats off to that movie? Because 2001 Space Odyssey does a similar thing, and at the time, apparently when it came out in the 80s, people were just like absolutely flabbergasted and didn't know what to say about this weird and retarded ending. But over time, people have said, hey, actually that's a masterpiece, and if you think about it, it talks about all these grand concepts to do with not science stuff, but human emotion and love and all this kind of stuff. So I think over time people are going to appreciate this as a masterpiece, the same as 2001: A Space Odyssey. But for the moment, it's as confusing as hell, and it's a little bit frustrating because you really want a really nice scientific solution and conclusion and success story, maybe with some tragedy as well, for this at the conclusion of this movie. But you just don't get it. You get just a bunch of confusion and no real solution. There's no solution to the movie. It's unbelievable. So anyway, very frustrating. So overall, I would definitely give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. If it was just the first two-thirds of the film, I would give it a 10 out of 10 because it was basically flawless. It was just the most awe-inspiring movie, and I saw it in gold class in Sydney, Australia. I was able to see it with the screen right up against my eyes. It was the digital format. It wasn't the 70mm format, but the sound was just awesome. The visual design was awesome, and the actors and characters mostly did a fantastic job. It was just the story that just disintegrated and destroyed itself at the end, but I will consider that over time, and maybe that'll improve. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you like this movie, and more content will be coming out soon. Thanks for watching. Interstellar.